Hey, I know some of you just got your food, and I know some of you got done 5 minutes ago, 10 minutes ago, and you're ready to get out of here.
Check.
But we do want to address, real quickly, the thing that he and I do for a living, since that's why we're here, and that's why you all are our customers. So, as I said earlier, there's not a whole lot exciting in the world of crop insurance as far as changes. There are some changes. More importantly, is the strategy in which you build your policy and how you want to tackle it this year. Because obviously there's plenty of options. Everybody's got options. Everybody's got products. But the whole theme, and you'll notice too, is this kind of a small little nuance. But on the slides for the crop insurance, you're going to see the braided rope. I think it's interesting. Our high school football team, their son plays on, and I help coach at the younger level. But every night on a Friday night, they get around a braided rope, and the family and cheerleaders and everybody gets on the rope. And the whole theme about the rope is that rope's only as strong as the sum of all the strands, right? By the nature of a braided rope. And that's why that's why the team uses that as a symbol of togetherness. What's interesting about that is we turn it to the crop insurance and what you guys do for a living and your strategies and all the things everything has been up here, whether it's weather. Thanks, Nate. Appreciate you. The grain marketing team, your weather guys, your fertilizer guys, your agronomists. Really, your success is dependent on all the strands in the rope, all right? I understand that crop insurance is just one strand in that rope. But what Doug and I do, we're pretty passionate about why we're here and what we do, and the choices that you have, to which we have set and digested, so we don't have to burn that time in our meeting with you. We can point you to directions that we think are applicable, be knowledgeable about them, and then put you in the right policy for you and spend the dollar accordingly. What we have on the screen here is as a result of the research of what we've done over the last couple years, just because, like Doug said, he always gets asked the question, what's everybody else doing? Well, there it is.
Imagine that. What's everybody else doing? It's like the ARC PLC. What's everybody else doing?
Not because what they're doing is right, it's just what they're doing, all right? Interesting differences. Doug's are always obviously on the left underneath his logo. Mine are over on the right. Subtle nuances in who's taking what where. But generally, the themes are the same. You know, last year in 2022, I had 80% in 80 and 85% coverage. Doug had 86. All right, the number dwindles as you move down to 80 to 75 and to 70 below.
Which, by the way, if you're in one of these lower categories or in something that's smaller, you're in that for a reason. So don't feel pressure or peer pressure. Well, I'm not doing what everybody else is doing. Please don't do that. You're in that because we talked about it, and that's because you want to be in there for a specific reason. So want to get that in there before we forget to say that.
Right, and there's like he said, I was getting ready to say, they're very applicable or very high chance that you picked a lower policy because you did something else. We're going to talk about band here in a minute, but if you dropped your multi-peril coverage because subsidies started to fall off and you picked up some band, obviously you're going to be in one of the different percentage categories. But that's just kind of where we reside. Since the beginning of my crop insurance career, that 80 and 85% made sense. It's shifting a little bit because other things are coming on the table. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And one of those things that has shifted is this band. Band is a Agrisampo product, which formerly Armtech, that they had in place when we were purchased by Agrisampo and started delivering the Agrisampo brand. But in 2020, we used it. And the statistics go like this. Majority of them use it because you can pick optional unit or enterprise unit. Most of us have gone to an enterprise unit policy where all the crop in one county is in the same pile, right? Because the subsidies are higher, it's cheaper, more affordable. Now on the band, you can pick up optional units and have some farm-to-farm coverage.
At the top 5 to 10%.
Whatever with the band you pick, it's covered farm by farm or optional unit, county section by county section. That has its merits, as we've proven over the time of using it. For instance, Doug last year had 36 policies, in 2020.
Yeah.
16 of them triggered a claim. Those 16 claims averaged getting about 90% of their band premium. But some of them got 314% of their band premium back. Some only just dipped into it. But on average, 90% of that band premium was returned. What's interesting about that is we talked, the weather guy talked, Jake and Nate talked about having some good crop years and building up good crop years. I know corn's been a little off, but at the same time, we have outpaced our APH to the point when you look at crop insurance, you may think, well, what's the point? I don't use it. My APH keeps getting higher, or my APH is lagging my yield potential that keeps getting higher and higher and higher. Here's a potential solution for that. Because the way he and I look at it is, well, at least these 16 policies garnered something back. One of them garnered enough back to say he got a discount on his multi-peril policy. Makes sense, because he got 314% of his band premium. That extra money over 100% went towards something, right? So it basically reduces your net premium paid. It's like a coupon if certain farms hit, right? That's the strategy. It works. It's been working. That was in 2020.
And we're somewhat trading dollars. You're putting more in, but you're getting more back. And the goal is try to reduce your net premium paid. You know, use these products, these upper levels, to try to bring back some claim money to reduce your actual cost per acre. And we'll go to a slide about that here in a minute.
Yeah, so we got one that sums that up. My stats are like that. It's interesting how this state line effect. We never experienced the same thing in his territory, my territory. This year was another example of that. But in 2020, I only had 3 policies trigger. And the highest claim was 25%. So they got a little back that year. You roll into 2021, Doug had 17 policies trigger. Highest was 219% return, 51% of return on premium on all policies as a result, an average return on the band claim. So that's how his was performing in 2021. Mine was almost identical in 2021. It was very, very close. 361% on the high end with the biggest claim I had. Because the whole purpose of band is you have issues in spots. Isn't that fair? You never have a good crop top to bottom. Somewhere something was off somehow. Except maybe, 2019. Was that the last really good one? All the way through?
2019 is when we were planted late and we got dry in the summer.
It was not 19.
Yeah. Michael had that wrong, by the way. He was talking about 2019 being a good corn year. It was not a good corn year. Not in our area. It was lower. But it's because we got planted late and we got real dry in the summer. But yeah.
But in 2023, it got real popular over in my neck of the woods because the multi-peril premium starts to get pretty rich. I'll show you this slide. And I know there are several in the room that have approached me about last year's billing around the fall and say, that's a lot of money. Yeah, it is. It is. So what we're trying to conceive is, can we put money in other spots that works better for us? Which, here's an idea. So like last year, I had a pretty good interest in the band, 54 total policies, 23 triggered a claim because a lot of that was over here to the east where some soybean yields were off and even some corn yields were off, just enough to dip below a 90 or 95% band. And it worked. It contributed back to our overall premium outlay. Again, the highest claim was almost 500% of what they paid into that band program. So their net liability on the multi-peril was obviously lower. They're getting some money back. When in the meantime, your enterprise unit isn't kicking up any claims for the last 3 to 5 to maybe since 2012. This one divides the farms up and has some merit to protect some of those individual problems. It's worth looking at and understanding how it works, evaluating how it's priced. Let me go through this example real quick, or Doug can go through this example.
Well, I was just gonna. We said, okay, if a guy took a standard 85% coverage enterprise unit, his cost would have been $31.48. But instead of doing that, he swapped it out for an 80% and then bought 90 to 95 on optional units at the top. Going to cost him a little bit more to do that, $35.40 an acre. But after the claim was applied, let's say 1 or 2 of those fields or units, those sections triggered a claim. After the claim was applied, his actual cost after those claims was actually $26.71. So he bought the little extra at the top, paid a little more in premium, but he got more back to net the total dollars out down to $26.71. So that's where that tool kind of comes into play. We have a 2012 or whatever, it's all going to flush out. But in these years where we're out yielding our APH, seems like over and over again, we always have that one, this section up here always drops. We got one little issue up here, one little issue down here. This band helps us capture some money back on those small problems that we have where the enterprise would have not triggered anything. And that's where this comes into a play. And in this example, the guy actually grew 98.5% of his approved corn yield and 97.3% of his approved bean yield. So he wasn't even close to any enterprise unit triggered claims. It was just on those optional units that triggered enough to come back into it. Because if you'd have been on enterprise at 85%, not even close. So that's where that kind of comes into play. It's not for everybody. It's just something you can use to kind of help fill that back in some.
Well, and keep in mind, there are some of you in the room that were old, let's say it that way. Years ago, we were participating in optional units, but what's happened to the optional unit policy on the multi-peril is it's gotten so outrageously expensive that we can't participate in 85% optional.
It's twice of an enterprise unit policy.
So you're not going to pay $75 an acre to insure your corn, all right? But if you're going to pay, 31 or 35, what's interesting about this, he could have a 98% of his approved APH or approved yield and still have a discount on his net overall crop insurance outlay because he had a claim on a few farms. This is a great example that Doug dug out to illustrate that. So that's how that thing works. It's way more complicated than when we just put on the screen, but we wanted to show you the results because after 2 or 3 years of proving itself, it has application. So something to consider between now and March 15th while we're working towards putting a strategy together for you. Perhaps if your ground's variable enough or you have some outlying farms that we can protect individually, let's look at the band. Let's see what it looks like. One key thing about band is we have not been able to use the revenue side of band to where it's full-on revenue like your multi-peril policy. The reason for that is it's too outrageously priced. Okay, but if we're talking about insuring 90 to 95%, that's insurance you can't get any other way. So with the way the base prices were last year,
on your individual coverage, yeah.
The way the base prices were last year at $590 and $1433, those were stout enough that we went yield only on the band and afforded it. Even though it cost a few extra bucks, you can see the results and how it generated. These conversations can get lengthy. Normally, we sit down, we present it, and let me think about it. We got to circle back. And band is one of those products that has, I say limited capacity, not because I'm imposing the scarcity principle on you all as far as buying it. I'm just telling you I don't want to be there on March 10th and you say, I was really thinking about that band. I'm like, well, we're about 2 weeks late on that. Okay, so band opened up in January 19th, I believe, for sales, and it's currently underway. So if this is something that interests you, it's worth giving Doug or I an elbow to say, hey, let's run some quotes. Let's figure out what that looks like. Let's not be the last to the party on band. Okay?
Michael kind of teed this up for us pretty good. Talking about planting soybeans in April. He was talking about that April forecast and, is it going to be dry enough? Is it going to be warm enough? Can we make it through a freeze? Well, so your soybean early plant date, that initial date is just for replant. It has nothing to do with your coverage. It's just whether you get a replant claim or not. So in my neck of the woods, it's April 20th. We could plant beans April 20th and after, get a replant claim if something happened. Well, they bumped that back 10 days starting this coming year. So that, RMA, USDA, they're realizing, we need to plant beans early. Okay, yeah. So in our neck of the woods, they bumped it up 10 days. Do we have those maps? Mm-hmm. So not everybody's from my neck of the woods. You start here. So if you're down in the lower portion here, your new initial plant date for replant on soybeans is April 5th. If you're up near me, you're, like I said, April 10th. We bumped it 10 days. Got some guys from the north here. You've been bumped to April 15th instead of April 25th. So that'll help a little bit. So you get an extra 10 days there. Go to Indiana. I don't know where everybody's from here. So where's the lines at there? I guess just right here. Right. Union County and below is the 5th. And above is the 10th. And if you get really north, the 15th. So kind of similar to Ohio, but running laterally. So that helps. That gives us an extra 10 days if we do get a window there and it's dry enough, which doesn't happen very often. How many years out of 10 do we get to plant beans in early April? But, hey, if we get a shot, you've got replant behind you to cover that. If it doesn't make it, you try again. So that's just on regular crop insurance and replant. Now, if you buy extra replant, if you buy the replant option, you can add another 20 days on top of that. Oh, you better go get your planter ready. We're going to start here pretty soon. So,
my math's correct. That's March 15th planted beans, and we'll replant them, and we'll pay you to replant them.
So there you go.
What is there to lose?
Hey, we laugh, but it's true. That's what that replant option does. If you get a shot at the end of March, we've got replant coverage to cover you to do that. Whatever. It's a crazy train we ride. So
it did kind of boggle my brain a little bit, because when the hail manuals were released and we went to replant option, and it used to be a 10-day early, and I'm like, well, that's going to be really early now that RMA moves the date up 10 days. So now we're 20 days earlier than we were before, or net 10. They bumped it to 20 in the hail manual. So now your effective bean plant date that can be paid for replant has jumped. If you buy the replant option, has jumped 30 days. So
guess they want beans planted early.
Why wait to plant beans? Besides the common sense.
It does give you confidence, though, because we always, before we go to the field, we think, oh, man, this thing's going to get frosted off. There's no way this is going to make it. But now that we got this behind us, if we have to start over, we have to start over. That's the way they're building it, so we'll fly with it.
Price discovery. You want that one?
Okay, thinking about prices for this coming year, the February price. This is the February price going back to 06. I don't know, can you guys read those numbers back there? David, can you see that number? Okay, ish. So we set a February price of $5.90 in 2022. We're almost exactly in the same spot starting today. Today the price starts getting set. So again, looking back at history, what a great place to be as far as base price goes in February. We also put the volatility number in there. That plays a big role in how much our insurance costs. You can see it fluctuates a lot. We got pretty high last year. So far, as of the beginning of February, it's down some. So that'll help us. Not a ton, but it'll help a little bit. But there's the history on corn. We're going to talk about on this too.
Well, and to the volatility point. So for a unnamed door prize, to which we don't actually have except pork chops, who can tell me what the when the volatility is set in this February pricing window? When is the volatility set? The whole month of February, first half, last half? Who? Last 5 days. Kevin Hollinger, make sure you get an extra pork chop. That's all I have. Is it on there?
Well, you got the last 5 days.
Oh, boxed in. So to which Kevin's sitting right in front of. And now I digress. No pork chop.
Hey, Kevin's been to a lot of meetings over the years. So.
That's the risk of looking at this today. But to get a snapshot of where we're at, obviously that red line is floating well below previous 22 and 21 at this juncture. The risk of putting these numbers on the board February 1st is that a lot can change in the next month. The volatility is set in the last 5 days of the pricing period. What you want is a quiet end of the month, and that will project us out into these volatility numbers that we're suggesting, that 20% on corn, which is 3% below last year's volatility set. It'd be fantastic. I'll show you here in a minute. If you look at soybeans, it's the same setup.
Yep. So we were 14.
That's wrong, isn't it?
It is. Who did this? Oh, my goodness.
Some rookie.
We were 14.33 in last year. Right now we're running that 13.65 range. Who knows what it'll end up. But either way, we'd all like to be at 14, but at least we're in the upper range of what February prices have been. Actually be the second highest. If that would stick, it would be the second highest going back to 06. So still a better number on the base price for beans for February. And then again, volatility starting to drop some there, even more than corn. We've had a more volatility drop.
Volatility line so far on soybeans is very, very flat compared to where we were the previous 2 years. And again, it all happens in the last 5 days. Really just need the folks from the Redding Huber Ag Consulting Group to just keep the market quiet for the next 30 days if you could.
Take care of that, would you?
No problem. So that's the
Tomorrow.
It'll change tomorrow. So that's kind of the setup today. All right. So what that projects is what we're getting ready to show you. Corn price is about the same. Volatility is lower. Bean price is off a little bit. Volatility is lower. What does that compute to in your mind about your premium cost as of today? Should be a little lower. A lot ahead of us here, but when we ran it relative to
Past 10 years
now, it is off quite a bit. If I ran the same numbers, and there's a lot of data in these two charts that you're getting ready to look at. On the corn side, there's 180 inputs. On the bean side, there's 180 inputs. We took 6 policies, 3 apiece, and ran them on a 10-year history to show you these numbers. The reason we did that was because the comment last fall, these crop insurance prices are out of this world. It's outlandish how much we're paying for crop insurance now. Well, you can see by the blue bars, you can see that statement's true. Obviously,
that's the premium. What are the data we pulled out? This was the premium at 85% going back to 2012. That's what this top number is on the cost.
So what we wanted to do was put it in perspective. Because as every speaker that's been up here before us has made the comment that the fertilizer market follows the grain market. The grain market is X. The fertilizer market's this. Land prices are up. This is up. That is up. Meanwhile, your crop insurance base premium has gone up relative or in correlation with everything else. But equate that relative to everything else going on. If you look at premium as a percentage of your total cost, so what we did was we took Purdue's crop cost and return guide, studied it for 10 years, looked at the changes, then put the premium cost as a percentage of the total cost put on an acre of corn. That is the orange line.
Yep, so right here. So that's how much your premium costs versus your total budget. This line right here. How much did your premium chunk out of your full budget on the given crop year?
So the moral of the story is your premium cost is up, but your entire cost is up because that percentage has not moved much. It's from 3 to 5%. Didn't even make it to 5. Make sense? It's perspective. It's relative. And if you look at it in terms of effective rate, which basically is how much premium are you paying for the dollars of coverage that you're getting, that effective rate has not changed at all. It's 5% across the board, 5.1 to 5.4.
Hats off to Van Zandt for reminding us. Let's look back, see how much it's costing us per bushel. How much is it costing us in part of our budget? It doesn't move much. It just kind of stays the same. Everything's kind of relative. It kind of goes like this. One question is, why are we dropping so hard in 2023? Well, your input costs have gone, huge. So the actual premium has become a smaller part of what your total budget is for this coming year just because input costs have just gone through the roof. So that's what makes that nosedive in this particular coming year.
Yeah, particularly because like corn, Purdue has put out a total cost number of $11.84, if I remember right. Mm-hmm. It's over $1,100. So now with this dip in premium projection down to $34 off of 48, that percentage as a result nosedives. Careful. Don't go home and tell your wife or bookkeeper that hey, crop insurance is going to be cheap. They said so. Because we've got a long way to go. We still have to establish a February price. We still have to establish a volatility. But as of today, this is the way it looks as a snapshot as of today. Now, Doug gave credit to Mr. Van Zandt. Steve Van Zandt's going to love this chart. Okay, so he brings up the point, if you relate it back to how many bushels it's costing you to insure the crop, it never wavers. That is the orange line.
Wavers little, very little.
So the moral of the story on the orange line is I'm taking the USDA national average farm price received, which is a cash price at the end of the crop year, for 10 years. And I took that amount of total cost divided by that number to create how many bushels it would take to pay for that policy. Never changes. It's always 8 bushels.
Roughly.
It ebbs and flows 6.6 to 8.7. That's what it's going to cost you to insure your corn. And keep in mind, all of this study was done at the absolute highest level of insurance available. 85% enterprise unit RP.
Right. So if you put this at 80%, the numbers would just pro down. You know, it'd be maybe 5 bushel. Instead of 8 bushel, it might be 5 bushel, but it would still have the same contour of a line.
Now, moral of the story is we're trying to prove to ourselves that what we were saying wasn't just made up. It's legitimately all relative with a lot of data behind it. Here's a look at the beans with the same setup. All right, 85% premium cost. Again, based off those parameters that we mentioned, looks to be like it's going to take a shot lower as of February 1st, January 31st. Looks like it's going to take a shot lower because volatility and that base price is off at the moment. All right, not to say that that's how we're going to finish. It's just where we're at today. If you look at it as a percentage of cost, Purdue had 814 on total soybean costs. So therefore, that percentage dives. Effective rate doesn't change a whole lot. Again, it's in that 3.8 to 5.2 range on the coverage that we're getting for the money we're spending. And if you look at it in terms of bushels, which I think is a great way to look at it,
it really flattens out.
it's 2 bushels of beans.
Yep.
So
at 85%. If you took 75 or 80, it's going to be a little bit different, but it's still relative to what the cost is.
So if you were to ask me what's crop insurance going to cost this year, I said it's going to cost you about 2 bushels of beans and 8 bushels of corn. Now, if you can tell me what those are going to cost.
At 85%.
At 85%. I mean, honestly, that's what this study proved. It hasn't moved much, okay? So we wanted to show you that just to give you an idea of where these prices are coming. Now, we're going to quote for the next 45 days. We're going to start hammering quotes out for all of you. They will change. If you do a quote on February 6th, it'll be different on March 15th to some degree. I don't know how much different it will be, but it will be different. But those are the things that go into it, and obviously you understand the parameters, but bottom line is it's all going to be relative. How do you want to cover it? How do you want to tackle it? Those are the options. Those are the decisions you have to make moving forward, utilizing the tools that you have. One of those tools is over at the FSA office. Doug's gotten one phone call about this in the last 3 weeks.
Arca PLC?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Phone rings off the
One or
hooks
two.
about this. So, again, what's everybody else doing is the question. What do we want to do? So Barry could probably give us 2 hours on ARC PLC and the breakdown. You want to do that? Okay. All right. We're not going to spend any time on it because ARC and PLC is kind of a moot point this year. The chances of either one of these triggering is almost nothing unless some kind of disaster happens with yield or prices absolutely crash. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time. Some of you have already talked to you about this. The PLC, which is just price loss coverage, just price, just that program at FSA. There's the reference points of wheat, corn, and soybeans, 550 wheat, 370 corn, 840 soybeans. The chances of us dropping below that, I think it's the national cash average that they compare it to. Is that right? If we drop below that, we're all in big trouble. So chances of PLC, not even close. So we switch to ARC. Okay, what does that do? ARC is yield and price, kind of like crop insurance. There's got 2 components working together. So again, not very valuable. The ARC reference point for wheat is 550. Corn's just slightly higher at 398, and beans is 957. A little bit better, but again, way below where we're expecting 2023. So we're kind of pushing ARC County because at least there's a yield component in there. If we have some kind of 2012 disaster, at least we'd have a yield component to maybe fill back in through this farm program to help us, but the chances are very unlikely. There's also ARC Individual. They only use 65% of your base acres, so we don't like that. That's usually not a good fit unless it's a specific situation with prevent plant or something like that. So again, ARC County is what we want to look at for this year, but not a very high priority decision.
Well, keep in mind when ARCA PLC first hit, and it was the delayed farm bill. We'd already had the crop in the ground. We knew what decision to make before we got to the FSA office because the crop had already started. Some of you were in ARC Individual because you had a big prevent plant that year in 2019 when you could go sign up. You're not going to know that rolling into this one. So all you know is currently where the current market is, and do you want to be in the price-only program, the price loss coverage on those reference prices, or do you want to utilize the ARC program that uses an Olympic average benchmark price over the 5-year period and sets those prices that way, then determines off of the county level yield. And the reason we have leaned towards the ARC County is simply because knowing that even these benchmark prices, these average benchmark prices for the ARC, are still probably a little low. A little. You have the county yield component, so if something happens in your county, you could potentially participate in program indemnities or payments. Make sense?
So kind of like you take out coverage with insurance, 70, 75% or 85%. ARC starts at 86% of the county yield with these reference prices. It's 86% trigger point. So,
any questions on ARC or PLC? Which I think the majority of the room, unless you were an ARC individual candidate, majority of the room is probably in ARC County anyway. So go sign up.
And you, from what I've been told, if you took ARC County last year and you want to take it this year, you don't even have to do anything. That's what I've been told, but call them and check. Just call them, double check.
Let me talk real quick about private products, and we'll get you out of here. I know I'm a little past my time already, and I don't want to keep you any later than that. So we have AgriSompo, which was Armtech's group of private products. I will say this. I showed you the stats from the band. I think the band is a fantastic tool. Okay, band sales are open now. Like I said, I had 54 of those in 2022. I think it's a very applicable product if you have variability in your soil. Give it a look. See if we can build a strategy that makes sense. If not, we go back to 80 or 85% enterprise and be happy. The replant option is another biggie. 34 of you took that option for me in 2022. There are some rate changes. They're wise to it because people are claiming significant amount on replant option. So the rates ratchet up. And they've also segmented their rates on different geographical locations. So if you want extra replant coverage, remember your policy covers you for replant. Okay, if you're by the initial plant date that we showed you on the maps. If you want early replant or if you want additional replant money, we look at adding a replant option through the private products. Okay, and then hail with wind. For whatever reason, you guys got nervous about hail last year. That is the most hail policies or hail with wind policies that I've sold in my entire 15 years of crop insurance.
Pretty high number.
136 if you took it. There's valid reasoning behind those policies, though. Given what we had with the good stand and the I don't want to overplay it, the severity of the storms that were popping up in the spring, it made some people nervous. So we stuck hail on. Remember, our hail binding has changed. It used to be 2 hours. You used to be able to look at the radar in Indianapolis and give me a phone call and be fine. Now it's posting midnight the next day, so the following morning at 12:01 a.m. All right? Not that that's a big change, but
They can still call you at 11:30.
you could call me at 11:30, 59, just as long as I get it in the next minute. But consider those supplements, particularly if you're on an enterprise unit, particularly if you lay in an alley. Excuse me. I heard back there an extra question about topographical issues with weather, and does it change it? And you guys were talking about some rock strip. I'm a proponent that wind sets up in alleys, storm sets up in alleys. You may live there. You may have had corn blown down by wind. You may want to consider the wind policy. You may get frequent occurrences of hail. For whatever reason, it seems like it trains up. If that's the case, let's quote it real quick and put that on. As far as the company change, let me just suffice it with this. Because we have the freedom now to go, well, it does not want me to show that, does it? Because we have the freedom now to go to whatever training we want to go to and get as educated as we want to, wow, it will not show it, and that's okay. It locked it up. Doug and I both went to separate Great American trainings. I also went to a rain and hail training. What's interesting was you always feel like the grass is greener on the other side. When we were an employee agent for Diversified Services and we only sold diversified crop insurance services, we get this set of products and that's all we get. Well, everybody talks about, well, this product or that product, why don't you have that, why don't you have that? And, well, we can't help it. But now that we've been to those other trainings, let me boldly tell you this. I honestly believe our private product offering is as good as any other one out there. Okay, I honestly believe Band is the front runner as far as an add-on policy if you need additional support at the top. I honestly believe that. I've seen those guys present their stuff. Not that I wasn't, disgusted with it. I just don't think it was any better. I truly believe that Agrisampo's private products team is pretty innovative. The tools that they build and the reaction to what is needed at the table when we sit down, it's a good group. I have more confidence now than I did last year because it was all new last year. I saw it perform. I've seen it perform for 3 years now. The simplicity, the speed at which they paid those ban claims and how they paid them, I have more confidence. So rest assured that even though that right now we're selling Agrisampo till the terms of the agreement expire, I'm pretty confident after sitting at Rain and Hail and sitting at Great American, I'm pretty confident we've got as good a product line as anybody does. Now let's just use it effectively. Okay, let's analyze. I think where the rubber meets the road is all the options you look at and how you build your strategy. If it fits your farm well, it'll be exactly what you need. We're not going to sell you a bunch of stuff just because we think it's flashy and cool. It needs to fit.
I've always said make sure you're okay to write that check in the fall and make sure it's enough that if it does go bad, you've got enough to cover yourself. You have to balance that. Take enough that you can sleep at night, but don't buy so much you get so sick in the fall that you got to pay so much for it. So try to balance those two things together. We can't insure every penny, every little thing, but we can stop the bleeding. We can get it to a point where it's comfortable. And if the crop year goes haywire, you've got a stopping point and you can go on to the next year.
Yep.
On this hail one, is that different than your regular hail?
When you say regular hail,
Well, it used to, I had protection on it for years, but I thought you used to, when you bought your hail insurance, you got a fire thing with it. Apparently that has changed.
no.
This is different than.
Well, so hail is always an add-on, okay? The multi-peril policy covers you for that peril. Hail is a covered peril. It's naturally occurring damage to the crop. However, you put your multi-peril crop in one big pile. Hail doesn't normally happen in one big pile across all your acres. So if you want to supplement that multi-peril, you add the specific hail peril in addition to that. And with that hail policy comes fire. That is the only place that fire is covered. Your multi-peril, if your standing crop burns, your multi-peril will not cover that fire because it was not naturally occurring. And I was so bold to say that in a group of agents, and I said, besides, we're on Earth, is there going to be a fire in a hailstorm? And he says, it's happened in Oklahoma. He says, a bolt of lightning comes out and lights up a standing field. Well, it doesn't happen around here much, but it happens. Okay, but the only place that a bearing fire, cigarette fire, trash fire is covered is through that hail policy. So there's hail, and then there's hail with wind, but all hail contains the fire endorsement. Yep.
It just gets lumped under hail.
Mm-hmm.
What's your question?
It's one of the named perils in the hail policy.
That hail endorsement actually gives a lot of coverage that I know Matt and Doug have talked to you guys about, but the fire being one of those, upset, overturn, so on and so on and so on. But yeah, that hail endorsement offers quite a bit of coverage.
You got anything else?
Grain fire, is that different?
Grain fire
That's an add-on.
is different. It can be an add-on or it can be a standalone.
That's
Grain
grain in the bin. No,
standing.
different style.
You can cover just grain fire for 25 cents per 100.
But nobody does that. They buy everything at once.
You just buy the hail at that point because you're only a dime more or whatever for hail. But grain fire, I've utilized the grain fire policy for like double crop beans after wheat stubble. He doesn't have hail on everything else, but it's dry enough in July. He's putting double crop beans in. He's worried about that wheat stubble catching. So we throw a grain fire policy on there almost annually for that guy. Just an idea. It's cheap. It's 25 cents per $100 coverage. And then he can just do his double crop beans. That's why we do it standalone. There's about 10,000 ways to skin this cat. But, you know, we'll sit down with you over the coming weeks and discuss how you want to go about it and what's the most economical place for your money to be. And then we'll build a plan and be good.
Like Jake said, know your input costs, know what risk you're worried about, and come to us and we'll put the pieces together.
I do want to piggyback. I'm glad you said that. I want to piggyback on what he said. When he talked about input costs, which we preach and preach and preach. I tell you what, though, if you know what that input cost is going into the table to buy your crop insurance, it changes the way you buy crop insurance. Because on the left side of our quote sheet is the guaranteed revenue per acre. And in certain years when price is $5.90 and $14.33, you can look right down that sheet and tell you how much you need. And it may not be 85, it may not be 80. I had a guy buy 70 or 75 the last couple years as a result of that, knowing your input costs. He said, if we get back to that number, I'm okay. So then I just put my sales book away and slide it over into my briefcase. Like, fair enough, sign here. You know, because he knows what he needs. It changes the way you market grain, changes the way you buy crop insurance, it'll change the way you buy inputs.
It's the anchor. It's the anchor to everything we do, like Jake said.
That's all I got. I know.
But it's a pain to pull out those input costs.
It's not easy to derive that number, but yet it's pretty powerful. Any questions, Gary? Yes. So all the crop in the county has to be insured under the same band. The farm by farm is the unit structure within that crop in county. So when I say farm by farm, I mean you can put band on optional units. But all the crop in that county has to be on that band. We can just dissect it by the different farms or different sections in that county. You don't have to put all counties that way. You can just choose one.
So no, you can't buy a specific field, but you can buy all that crop and then have them split up. That's what you're asking. Yeah.
Good question, though. Yes? How far? You said a little bit, right? All right. Let me give you the Cliff Notes version of Vomitoxin. I've always felt like the damage discount factors in the multi-peril crop insurance are terrible, and they still are. Okay. I thought that they were better for vomitoxin and aflatoxin because the way that crop insurance handles a damage discount is it reduces your production to count. So if you had 200 bushel corn, and you had vomitoxin in the 5 to 10 parts per million range, they would reduce your production to count by 22.5%. Whoa, all right. So that's a big number, right? So you're going to take 45 bushels off that 200 bushel yield, and you're going to drop me down to a 155. Well, claim worthy. However, it only applies to the acres affected of the enterprise unit. What did the rest of the corn do? 210, 220, 195. Didn't dip into a claim. Enterprise unit then absorbed that small loss, kind of like we had a hailstorm on that vomitoxin field. But that's the way VOM is adjusted, all right? It has to be identified between the 5 to 10 parts per million to even be eligible for said claim. So if they're pulling in a 4.2, 3.1, that's not payable. That's considered clean corn, even though it might be discountable at the elevator. So that 5 to 10 was the threshold, and then however much corn you had in the 5 to 10 determined whether or not you had a claim. The thing that really outpaced most of the claims was the overall corn yield. Even the VOM trouble areas, or better put, the VOM troubled varieties, didn't accumulate enough damage to create claims. I had, I don't know, maybe a dozen VOM claims in.
Probably none of them are going to.
None of them paid.
They just didn't dip low enough to cause a trigger point to claim.
Which puts me back into the category that the multi-peril crop insurance damage discount charts.
They're not very helpful.
Not very helpful. Unless it gets really bad. I think they're there for when it's really bad. You got flooded out corn. You got mold and damage across a bunch of acres in the bottoms. That's helpful. Anybody else have any other questions? I just want to close by saying we appreciate all of you guys. We appreciate the trust that you put in us to build a plan that works for you. We appreciate the fact that you come back year after year. You come however many miles to come to this meeting. Hopefully it was worth your time. Hopefully you gleaned all sorts of stuff off of Mr. Ward's presentation, and then Jake and Nate and Michael Clark. We look forward to sitting down and have these conversations with you one-on-one. We got a lot to talk about, but we'll build a plan for you.
Yes.
You don't have anything else?
I appreciate you guys. Look forward to the one-on-one meetings. Have your mind on what you think you want to do. Be ready to go. Look forward to it.
If you do want to get, personally, I'll have my calendar up here. If you guys want to put your name down to reserve a slot to visit, we'll go ahead. I'll break my calendar out. We'll start putting names down while you're here. Otherwise, be careful traveling home, and thank you all. Appreciate you.